Today is the last day of our summer 7-day session, 18th of January 2014, and we'll be taking up another story from The Hidden Lamp, Stories of 25 Centuries of Awakened Women, edited by Florence Kaplow, and this is from 9th century China, and it's quite brief. An old woman asked Master Zhao Zhou Zongshan, "I have a body that contains the 5 obstacles. How can I be free of the world of suffering?" Zhao Zhou said, "Pray that all beings are born in heaven and that you yourself suffer forever in a sea of hardships." This is the great Zhao Zhou, whose dates are 778 to 897. Japanese name is Joshu Jushin, and he was a Dharma heir of Nanchuan, Nansen in Japanese. And many of the koans in the Mumon Kan and the Butte Cliff record are based on stories about him and his disciples. And of course, he is the originator of the koan Mu. The editors also mention that he seems to have had a particularly strong affinity for women. And here in this story, an old woman is asking him a question. She is, like so many of the women in these stories, isn't even named. So her question is, "I have a body that contains the 5 obstacles. How can I be free of the world of suffering?" There are different possibilities here in terms of what these 5 obstacles might be. There's in both Mahayana and the Theravada tradition, there's a list of the 5 hindrances that meditators have to contend with. But these are barriers to awakening. And they are desire, anger, sloth, restlessness, and doubt. And desire specifically sensory desire, in other words, hedonic gratification. Another possibility is that she's referring to the 5 states that it was said a woman could not become, 5 types of beings. And these are the god Brahma, the god Chakra, Mara, the tempter, a wheel-turning king, and a Buddha. And it is part of Buddha's teaching that a woman can't become a Buddha. And indeed, in at least up until recently, part of Tibetan nuns' practice was a prayer for rebirth as a man. My guess is that since people like Ani Tenzin Palmo have got involved in training nuns in Tibet and elsewhere, that this would no longer be part of the practice. But this was the belief that if you wanted Buddhahood, you had to be born as a man. And I don't think one has to stretch the imagination too much to understand what effect that teaching might have on women when they hear it. Another possibility that the commentator on this story mentions is that also in the teachings there was a list of the 5 obstacles particular to women, and these are the requirement to leave home and to be married into another family, menstruation, pregnancy, childbirth, and the obligation to wait on a man. I don't remember reading these as being stated as obstacles so much as the suffering particular to women that men don't have to deal with. So really a description of what it was like in ancient India. I mean, obviously some of these relate to physical things, but then others are more cultural, like the obligation to wait on a man or be subject to a man. In both India and China, women had to be subordinate to a man, and first it was to the father, then to the husband, and then after your husband died, to your son. Actually, it doesn't really matter which of these five the old woman is thinking about. The important point here is that she feels stuck. She feels weighed down. I have a body that contains the five obstacles. And she's not only feeling stuck, but she really wants out. She asks Joshu, how can I be free of the world of suffering? And he replies, pray that all beings are born in heaven and that you yourself suffer forever in a sea of hardships. It's very, very bitter medicine that he's offering her. If you weren't listening very carefully, you could even think it was a kind of curse. He doesn't say, I pray that you yourself suffer in a sea of hardships, though, but invites her to hope this for herself. To suffer in a sea of hardships while everyone else is born in heaven. What's he talking about here? How is this going to free her? Though it does sound a bit like a curse, it's actually an ultimate vote of confidence. But it is strong stuff, and we don't know why he needed to reply in this fashion. Maybe it wasn't the first time that she had asked. Perhaps she revered Joshu and had some thought that he could deliver her in some way. She came in and bowed very low, very submissive. But there's a sense that she was saying, given all my problems, the fact that I'm such a mess, that I have all these obstacles, and what's more, I've been born in this female body, and I'm old. What hope is there for me? Can you give me some ray of hope? That's what she was looking for. This is something I think that comes up for people sometimes is just, if you dwell in all your difficulties, it can go from being we need to be honest about our hindrances, because then we can work with them. But if we focus too much on it, it can just become discouraging. We can even sort of be thinking to ourselves, well, I'm past it. What hope is there that I can change at this point? I haven't had much luck up till now, have I? And she is here, an old woman, nearing the end of her life. She may have been starting to feel quite desperate. And Joshu was probably very old. He went on pilgrimage in his early 50s after his teacher died, Nansen, to train further by meeting with other teachers. So he certainly didn't think he was past it when he set off on that pilgrimage. And he didn't actually settle down until he was 80, teaching for 40 years, dying when he was 120. So when he was in his 50s setting out a pilgrimage, he still actually had more than half his life in front of him. So he certainly was very aware that we're never too old to practice. But instead of saying something encouraging like that, or you're okay, you're whole and complete just as you are, lacking nothing. Instead of that, he invites her to pray that she suffers forever in a sea of hardships, and at the same time wishes that all other beings are born in heaven. This advice quite resembles a practice that is taken up in Vajrayana Buddhism. It's a bodhicitta practice, and it's called taking and giving, or tonglen. And it's done in different ways, and we don't need to get too much into the details of how it's done, but essentially you take suffering of the many beings into your heart and then give away all your own well-being. In one version of the way you do this, you very, in as detailed fashion as possible, imagine different kinds of suffering, and then imagine them as this kind of murky, dark smoke that you suck into your heart, and then you also send out light. And sometimes practitioners will actually imagine the demon of their self-cherishing being destroyed by this black smoke that they're pulling into their heart area. And then imagine this warm light suffusing suffering beings everywhere. It's quite a, as Joshu's statement is, it's quite a strong medicine in terms of the practice. And it's the exact opposite of what our self-cherishing seeks normally. So this old woman's wanting out of her suffering, out of this world of pain. And Joshu shockingly turns around 180 degrees. In order to appreciate this practice, we have to understand what it's aiming to dismantle. The classical way of talking about this in the teachings is as self-cherishing. Sometimes the demon. They say the demon of self-cherishing, and it's stated that this is our one enemy in all the universe is the demon of self-cherishing. In Western psychology, this demon is called narcissism. This term narcissism comes from a Greek myth, the myth of Narcissus, who was a young and beautiful man who fell in love with his own reflection in a pond, and eventually was drowned in trying to unite with that reflection. And of course it's also the name of a flower. Narcissus is the Greek name for the daffodil. And daffodils, the flower sort of droops down. So if it's growing near water, it appears to be sort of looking down at its reflection in the water. So instead of turning its face to the sun, as many flowers do, it's absorbed in its own image. And we can keep this in mind in terms of recognizing our own narcissism. I'd like to read a little bit from the book we quoted from earlier in session, The Lost Art of Compassion. The author, Lorne Ladner, gives a very vivid description of the nature of our narcissism. Narcissism strives desperately to avoid awareness of our vulnerability. At the heart of narcissism is grandiosity, a gross overestimation of our own importance in the universe. Terrified of our true situation as tiny, fragile beings in an infinitely vast universe filled with countless other beings, we grasp strongly at a superficial, idealized image of ourselves. The narcissistic self-image is always false. It is an illusion that we make up to comfort ourselves. Emphasizing appearance over substance, we hold on to our idealized image and simply deny or repress contradictory evidence of our fragility, impermanence, and interdependence. To feed this delusion, we compulsively build up fantasies of unlimited success, beauty, brilliance, or love. We sometimes get a taste of this side of our narcissism in Sesshin, when things go really well in our practice, when we suddenly find ourselves more concentrated, or we have a strong insight, and we can suddenly flip from that into fantasies of success and beauty and brilliance, where we imagine impressing everybody with our understanding, or we start to, in our heads, write a brilliant article about this or that. Then the flip side is when things are going badly, then we tell ourselves dire stories about how hopeless we are, how so much worse off we are than everyone else in terms of our obstacles and hindrances. two sides of one coin. These sorts of stories. He continues, wanting infinite gain or wealth, we deny the inevitability of loss. Wanting infinite power and health, we deny the truth of illness and weakness. Wanting infinite respect and praise, we deny the truth of our own flaws and failings. And wanting infinite life, we deny the truth of impermanence and death. We distance ourselves psychologically from the sufferings of others, which remind us of the things we wish to deny, so that even as we speak of suffering, we don't really feel its reality empathically. There is even a serious danger of our using fantasies of unlimited compassion, spiritual virtue, or enlightenment to feed our narcissistic delusions. If we grasp at some image of these things rather than do the hard work of developing them in our lives. And people who do this do turn up at Zen centers and in sessions. People with a lot of ideas about awakening. Back in the literature, the Zen Chan literature, we talk about a stink, the Zen stink. The practice of taking and giving, this is this Tonglen, works directly against all these aspects of narcissism. It cuts through the illusory security blanket in our hearts and works against our delusions and defenses. So this is really what Joshu is offering to the old woman. A tool to cut through her self-cherishing, to see into it, to go beyond what she thinks of as her obstacles, and through her wish for some kind of escape from this world of suffering. He goes on to talk about how the fear often comes up when people are given this practice. He says this fear comes because we identify strongly with our own narcissism. Unable to tell the difference between ourselves and our self-cherishing, we feel that we will be destroyed when it is destroyed. Imaginally taking in the suffering of every person on the planet who has AIDS cannot give you AIDS. And then he says in brackets, really, if you could eradicate all of the AIDS on the planet by taking it on yourself, wouldn't that be wonderful? There are stories about this kind of thing. And of course the Christ myth is a prime example of this. Christ who dies for the sins of the world. The point is to bring up your fears as you do the practice. They are the signs that you're getting to your inner enemy. A certain amount of fear and psychological discomfort or even temporary disorientation in your practice may be a sign that your narcissistic defenses are beginning to break down. If you don't ever feel afraid when doing taking and giving, then you probably aren't doing the practice deeply. Fear often comes up when people do intensive zazen as well, and it's often because we get close to our edge. We start to see or knock against our defenses, our armor, and that can be very frightening. So fear can be a good sign. even though it can feel like we're going backwards or not making progress. He says, on the other hand, if you give in to your fears by remaining emotionally detached from others' suffering, then you're letting narcissism win, ensuring that you will remain trapped in a claustrophobic and endlessly frustrating world of illusory images. The brave approach at this point is to use your fear or discomfort to further your practice of taking and giving, expanding your empathy to the countless other beings who are afraid and uncomfortable, or who, like you, use narcissism to deny and suppress such feelings. As you do this practice of taking again and again, focusing on various kinds of suffering, if you do it well, you are deconstructing your own narcissism. Jung once noted that the fear of self-sacrifice lurks deep in every ego. And he went on to explain that the ego separates itself from the living, dynamic world out of fear, thereby gaining only a partial and illusory sort of security. The narcissistic ego is never at home in the world. Too afraid to open itself in joy to real experience, or to open itself in compassion to other beings, it holds on to petty illusions, rigid expectations, and grandiose fantasies. And these two go together, closing off to other suffering, pushing away those uncomfortable feelings, also means that we close ourselves off to joy. To open to one is to open to the other. To close to one is to close to the other. He says, taking and giving is a profound psychological method. It's a subtle but extremely important point psychologically that one is taking all that suffering and smashing it into the demon heart of the self-cherishing thought. You aren't using it to destroy yourself, and this is not a masochistic approach. It's just the opposite of masochism. It's intended to bring you courage, love, and joy, but it's an easy point to misunderstand. To do this method well, you must work continually at disidentifying from your self-cherishing narcissism. Narcissism gets destroyed over and over again. We learn this in Sesshin, that we have to let go of our the products of our narcissism, all our thoughts of I and me and mine, over and over again. He continues that the psychology of normal narcissism is one of partial engagement with the world, driven by hope and fear. We connect with others, hoping to get what we want from them, but also keep much of ourselves apart for fear of being hurt. We work in the world to gain wealth and status, but escape into fantasies of effortless success, grandiose achievement, or escape and retirement. We love what is pleasurable in ourselves and our worlds, but live with projections, denial, and anger to try and block out unpleasant reminders of aging, loss, humiliation, illness, and death. In the practice of taking, we use the compassionate awareness of suffering to destroy this way of being in the world. Again and again, we use awareness to destroy our denial and our projections. We aren't destroying ourselves in the process. It's a very precise attack on our denial, our prejudice, our grandiosity, our delusions, and our terrible selfishness. We are destroying that old, rigid, self-centered, joyless identity. And this is what we're doing also in our Zazen. This method that he's describing actually makes breath practice or koan work look quite mild in comparison. But it's the same process. this deep habit of self-cherishing produces all these thoughts in our minds of I and mine and other. And moment by moment, we deprive those thoughts of their lifeblood, which is our attention. That's the only way they have any power, is if we pay attention to them, is if we buy into them. Imagine that they actually refer to something real. So again and again and again we shift away our attention from these productions of self-cherishing and back to the breath or the koan. He continues, as the attack on self-cherishing progresses, genuine giving becomes more possible. We become more capable of feeling joy, of accepting life as it is, and of truly loving others. It's not that we ever seek out suffering for ourselves. Without the narcissism that holds us as the center of the universe, though, the suffering that we do experience pales by comparison with the vast suffering of countless others. And one simple form of this practice, which can be very helpful and done any time, is if we're in the midst of some very painful experience, a very painful emotion comes up, we can just at that moment think of all the other beings in the world that are at the same moment experiencing that painful emotion, and then just wish that they and we be relieved of that suffering. It really changes one's experience to do this, because it takes us out of our lonely mind of feeling sorry for ourselves and actually connects us to the world, to the sea of suffering that we and millions of other beings are so often immersed in. If we undergo some hardships in the process of trying to be of service to others, that may even appear wonderful. We all undergo hardships, sicknesses and death anyway. How much more meaningful, tolerable and even beautiful they are when experienced for the sake of love. To open our hearts really can in a profound way make our life meaningful. Elsewhere in the same chapter, Ladner gives an example of somebody who has practiced this method for many years, many years. Somebody called Rebur Rinpoche, a Lama who was born in Tibet, 1923, and underwent training from an early age after he'd been recognized as a reincarnation of an earlier Buddhist teacher, and spent a lot of time in solitary retreat, and did not leave Tibet when there was the big exodus, when the Dalai Lama left, and as a result he was shortly after that exodus arrested as a political prisoner by the Chinese government, and spent 20 years as a political prisoner, and during this time underwent an enormous amount of hardship, including torture. And Ladner writes that he never talked about what was done to him. He would just say that it was that if he told anybody, they would find it hard to believe, because they were what was done was so extreme. But all through this time, this 20 years of imprisonment, he undertook this Tonglen practice, this practice of taking and giving. And he would talk about how for others in the prison, their lives were totally devastated, but that for him it was this torture and he was going through became the fuel of this practice. He said it became a means for powerfully deepening empathy and compassion for the terrible sufferings of others. At any given moment, each of us knows that people with whom we're not acquainted personally are experiencing unbelievable, horrific sufferings. We may care in some vague way, but mainly we feel that their sufferings are not terribly important to us. Our narcissism keeps us from recognizing our interdependence, how justice or suffering anywhere is a threat to justice and happiness everywhere. Concerned almost exclusively with ourselves and our immediate circle of family and friends, we are often indifferent to the intense sufferings of others. The attitude of those who sincerely practice taking and giving is just the opposite. Developing an expansive sense of compassionate concern for others makes our own suffering less overwhelming and less important in their eyes. Rather than allowing such suffering to upset our minds, practitioners use the practice to help them empathize with others, transforming suffering into fuel that feeds a great light of loving compassion in their hearts. Ribo Rinpoche, in describing the effect of doing this, he said, although it doesn't relieve the person who's doing it of the particular suffering that they're having at that moment or unfavorable circumstance, the immediate result is that that person's mind is not affected by the pain. What the practice develops particularly is courage and a peace of mind that can undergo enormous difficulties. He actually says that his experience in prison were transformed into nothing but pure joy. After he was released, he actually worked with the Chinese government, helping to restore some of the artworks that had been damaged by the Chinese army when they invaded. And then eventually he escaped to India and wrote many books and worked to preserve a lot of the culture that had been destroyed in Tibet itself. And then Ladner gives a little description of the quality of this Ribo Rinpoche. He says, not long ago I visited for a couple of nights at a house where he was doing a meditation retreat. On the first night I was there, he was very kind in staying up late to talk and meditate together. I then went to sleep. I woke up at one point in the middle of the night, surprised to hear in the distance Ribo Rinpoche, wide awake, playing a drum and bell as he happily sang ancient Tibetan songs. In the early morning he was still there in the same spot, smiling, laughing, singing, and meditating on compassion. I thought about his body, how old and badly damaged from his years in prison, and I wondered what sort of mind one might develop that would lead to that kind of joy, spontaneous, independent of circumstances, unassailable, and always flowing outward. Time is up. We'll stop there and recite 4 vows.